common factoring lesson that we're doing today. So I'm going to start off by saying we want to sort of look at what is similar in all of these things. So what is the same or common about the following? Put them into groups. So if we're looking at Blue Jays, Sabres, Bulls, Nationals, Yankees, Mets, Maple Leafs, Patriots, Raptors, Canadians, and Cavaliers. Okay, so first off, we can break them up into American teams and U.S. teams. So that's just one way of looking at it. So the Bulls are American, Sabres are American, Blue Jays, Maple Leafs, Canadians, Nationals, I'm assuming American, Mets, Yankees, Canadians, Canadians are Canadian, Cavaliers, and then Raptors. Okay, so hopefully you're saying, yeah, but Mrs. Gilfillan, we can also break it up by sports teams or, excuse me, what they play, okay? So for example, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put all my basketball teams over, and I'm grouping now, not by country, but by sport. Right away, I have Maple Leafs and Canadians. They are both hockey teams. And then Blue Jays, Mets, Yankees. I'm assuming Buffalo Sabres. I wish my husband was here. Buffalo Sabres. I don't even know, guys. Lensec. Okay, so what? Nationals are baseball, so they go with the Yankees, Mets, Blue Jays. Sabres are, I just looked it up. Hockey, I think. Buffalo Sabres. And Cavaliers are basketball, and the Patriots, okay? So again, although I might have messed up here on my sports teams, you can see there's different things that we can group by here, okay? We could even go farther and say where they are actually located as another grouping factor, okay? So now let's bring this a little back to math and say, okay, now all of a sudden we have all these numbers and variables and I want to group, okay? So the most obvious one is to group everything with x's. So 2x, just a single x, sorry, 9x. I'm going to just group my numbers. So 2, 3, 8, and 7. Now I have an also and 12. And then I'm going to group my x squareds. So my x squareds. Okay, so that's one way I can do it. So I have my x's, my constant numbers, and then my x squareds. I can also group by multiples, for example. So 2, 4, so 2 and 4, 8, 12. So I'm going my common numbers here. So, 2, 2, 4, 8, 12 are all divisible by 2 or by 4. They're all also even numbers. And then I also have like say 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So now we're just looking at odd numbers here. Again, the variable doesn't matter so much here. All we're doing is really looking at that number itself, the coefficient. So this is really getting us ready to the idea of something being the same or common. Now we're looking at what is the same about each term in the expression, not comparing the different expressions, okay? So if I move this aside, each one of these examples, you're going to be able to divide by a common number. So this one here, if I just get my pen. So this one here, does everyone see that 3 and 6 are both divisible by 3? So this is when all of a sudden we bring out that 3, and what this is really telling us is that each one of these numbers is divisible by that 3. So it can be divided by 3. Sorry for my poor handwriting. I'm just using my mouse. So what we do is we sew a 3 bracket, and now 3 divided by 3 is just x. We only have x left. Plus 6 divided by 3 is 2. So now all of a sudden we've done something called common factoring. The common factor in 3x plus 6 is actually 3. We take that 3, put it out front of a bracket, and we are left with x plus 2. So let's try again here. If I have 4 and 20, 4 and 20 are both divisible by 4. Hopefully everyone agrees with that. That means both terms can be divided by 4, and I will get a number without a decimal. Because they're both divisible by 4, 4 now becomes my common factor. I put 4 out front and open my bracket. Now what I'm doing is I'm just dividing 4 divided by 4, which gives me 1, and so therefore just leaves me with 1x. Now I'm going to have minus, because that's the sign between the two, and I have 20 divided by 4. 20 divided by 4 is 5, and that is what I'm left over with. So again, this is my common factor. If we go to the next couple examples and do some more, I'm going to again look at what number is divisible. So 5 and 40 are both divisible by 5. They both can be divided by 5. 5 is a multiple of both 5 and 40. So what we're going to do, and I should really be putting some equal signs here, is bring that 5 out front as my common factor and open my bracket. 5 divided by 5 becomes 1, so I'm just left with x squared left over. And then 40 divided by 5 is just 8, so I'm left with 8. And so now if I take out my common factor, I have 5 bracket x squared plus 8. If I was to expand this back through, I would get back to my original 5x squared plus 40. Not only can I have a common factor of a number, but I can also have a common factor of a variable. In both terms here, I have at least one x. So instead of dividing by a number here, I can divide by that variable itself. So I'm dividing each term by x. Again, when I'm doing this, my x comes out front of my bracket because that is my common factor. It does not disappear, it just goes out front. X squared divided by x just leaves me with 1x left, and x divided by x leaves me with 1. Please do not drop the common factor in front of the bracket. I always say it's like if you're eating a sandwich and you drop a tomato out of the sandwich. It doesn't disappear, it just sits on your plate. So please make sure you're not dropping it, okay? So again, that x goes out front. So this dividing is called common factoring. We don't get rid of the common factor, we put it in front of as a coefficient. This is exactly like the opposite of expanding. So instead of expanding out, we are grouping things together by common factoring. So common factoring. Looking at each example, do you see one factor that goes into each term? What can you divide out / factor out? So like we did before, if we're looking at this example, I have 3x plus 3. What I want to do is look at a number or a variable that is common in both terms. In this case, what is common is a 3. So I'm going to divide both sides by that 3. As soon as I know that I'm going to be dividing by that 3, that means 3 is my common factor. So I come down to my next row, put a 3 in front of my bracket. I am common factoring out that 3. Now all of a sudden I have 3 divided by 3 gives you 1, so you're just left with the x. Your plus sign goes in. 3 divided by 3 here leaves 1, and I close my bracket. So my common factor is 3 bracket x plus 1, close the bracket. Okay, on to B. 12 and 4. Both terms do not have an x, so common factor is not an x. However, both terms can be divided by 4. Both terms can be divided by 4. So, again, equals 4 is my common factor, put it out front as my coefficient, open my bracket. 12 divided by 4 is 3, so I'm left with 3x. Don't drop the variable because there's nothing that's going to divide it out, so it stays. Then I have 4 divided by 4, which gives us 1. So here's my common factor. My common factor is 4. When I divide both terms by 4, I'm left with 3x plus 1. Again, another way you could check this is by expanding or multiplying through by that number in front. Let me just expand here so I have some space to do these next ones. Okay, and again, we're going to common factor. So I'm looking at my 5x minus 10, and they are both divisible by 5. So my common factor is going to be that 5. Okay, equals 5x divided by, sorry, I forgot, my common factor is 5, so it comes out front of my bracket. My bracket's a little messy there, so let's try to fix it. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to use my finger to write here on my key on my mouse pad, so it's a little hard. So my bracket, 5 divided by 5 gives me 1, so I'm just left with that x. Minus in between the 2, so I put in a minus, and 10 divided by 5 is 2, so I'm left with 2. So my common factor is 5, bracket x minus 2. And finally, my last one, d, I have an x squared plus 2x. There are no numerical coefficients in front that are divisible by the same number. However, there is an x in both. So that means my common factor in this case is x. Both terms can be divided by x. So when I'm answering this, I have bring out my x, my common factor comes out as a coefficient, and now I have x squared divided by x just leaves me 1x left, and 2x divided by x just leaves me that plus 2 because the x's cancel each other out. And I'm done factoring here. All right, common factoring. We can even do this with trinomials. So this is the exact same thing. All of a sudden, we just have 3 terms now. So we're looking at all 3 terms to figure out what the common factor is. So in this case, hopefully it's fairly obvious that each one of these numbers is divisible by 2. They all have 2 as a coefficient, so I can divide them all by 2. So again, when I'm common factoring, I take that numerical coefficient out front, open my bracket, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'm just left with my x squared, plus 2 divided by 2 again here is 1, so I'm just left with my x. And 2 divided by 2 is here is 1, so I'm just left with plus 1. Okay, I've now common factored that trinomial. Okay, if I go on to b, I'm looking at 3x squared minus 6x plus 12. Hopefully you realize that 3, 6, and 12 are all divisible by 3. So that means my common factor is going to be 3, which means all 3 terms are divided by that number. In order to get my answer, I go equals, I put my common factor out front of my bracket, and now I'm going 3x squared, divided by 3 just leaves me with 1x squared, because 3 divided by 3 divides into 1. Negative 6x divided by 3, well, negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2, and please don't drop the variable of x. And 12 divided by 3 gives you a positive 4. So we're done here, okay? Again, if you were to expand back through that 3, you'd go back to the original question, but now we factored out a common factor of 3. We're going to just do 2 more examples. So here, 2, 6, and 8. I do not have an x in all 3 terms, so x is not a common factor. However, 2 is. 2, 6, and 8 can all be divided by 2. So my common factor is 2. In order to factor, I say equals, throw my common factor out front, open my bracket. 2x squared divided by 2, 2 divided by 2 gives you 1, so I'm just left with my x squared. 6x divided by 6 gives you plus. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Don't drop your variable x. And negative 8 divided by 2 gives you negative 4. And I've now common factored by dividing all of those terms by the common factor of 2, and keeping that 2 out front. Last one, 2, 8, and 10. Again, all the numbers are divisible by 2. In this course, generally, all of the number in front of your x squared should be your common factor. The number in front of the x squared in this course should be your common factor. So again, I put that 2 out front. 2 divided by 2 just leaves you with x squared. Negative 8 divided by 2 leaves you with negative 4x. Don't drop the variable. And plus 10 divided by 2 leaves you with plus 5. That's a plus sign, guys. Plus 5. Okay, and always close the bracket at the end. Okay, so that's how I'm common factoring a trinomial. So common factoring, here the common factor is x. So factor out the x for each of the following. So here I have my numerical coefficient in front of my x squared is 1. I don't really need to divide everything by 1. However, there's an x squared and an x. So my common factor here is x. So what I'm going to do again is divide each term by x. In order to do my common factor, I'm going to put that x out front of my bracket, open my bracket, x squared divided by x just leaves me with 1x left, and plus 3x divided by x leaves me just with the plus 3. Okay, those x's cancel each other out or become 1. All right, on to B. Again, this one here has 2. It has a numerical coefficient and a variable. So 2 and 8 are both divisible by 2. 2 and 8 are both divisible by 2. So first things first, I'm going to take out a 2. But both terms also have an x. So I can divide both by 2x. So now all of a sudden my coefficient, my common factor coefficient is not just a number or a variable. It is a number and a variable. So 2x. Now I have 2 divided by 2, which leaves us as 1, and x squared divided by x, which just leaves us with 1x left. Negative 2 divided by 2 gives you negative 4, and the x's cancel each other. So now I'm finished common factoring. C. Again, I'm just looking at a number here, or a letter, excuse me, so I have an x and an x. I have x in both terms, so x can be my common factor. I divide both by those numbers. So I put my common factor out front, open my bracket. X squared divided by x just leaves me with 1x left. Plus 15x divided by x just leaves me with the 15 because the two x's cancel. Close my bracket. Last one, again D, 40x squared minus 5x. Both terms are divisible by 5. And both terms have an x in them. So again, my common factor here for both is 5x. So I take out my 5x, put it out front of my bracket, and 40 divided by 5 is 8. X squared divided by x just leaves me with 1x. 5 divided by 5 is 1, and x divided by x is 1. So here, it doesn't go to 0, guys. It just goes to 1, because any number divisible by itself is 1. Okay, so that's it for common factoring. So now your homework is page 294 to 295, question 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and 14. If I went too fast in the video, feel free to watch it as many times as you need to and follow along to fill in your notes. Thanks, everybody.